Hi, it's Joseph once again, and I haven't made a video in quite a few months, so I thought it's time to get back into it. So here I am with another video, and today I'm going to be highlighting some of the highlights of my Chet Baker collection. Chet has been in the vinyl community news lately because everybody was waiting for the repress of Chet Baker Sings, and I'll get to that album in a little bit. But I'm going to go through several albums in my collection and talk a little bit about Chet and how I got into him and my experience as far as listening to Chet Baker. So here we go. My introduction to Chet Baker came with one of his later albums. This is his album, Chet Baker, She Was Too Good to Me. And this is actually on the CTI label, which is kind of unusual for Chet. You would never imagine him on the CTI label with all of its funk jazz output. But this is pretty much a straight ahead album. And this was my, like I say, my introduction to Chet. And this was recorded, I believe this was part of his comeback when this was recorded in 1974. It's got a great lineup with Bob James, Paul Desmond, Ron Carter, and Jack DeJohnette on drums, and also Steve Gadd. But he's primarily playing, of course, standards, Autumn Leaves, the ballad, self-titled of the album, She Was Too Good to Me, and a really excellent rendition of Hank Mobley's Funk in a Deep Freeze. And Chet's playing on this album is really remarkable. He's crystal clear, beautiful tone, strong lyrical lines. So a couple of vocals. He does a vocal on What'll I Do and She Was Too Good to Me and With the Song in My Heart. And this is perhaps one of my favorite Chet Baker albums. It's kind of a sleeper. Most people don't talk about this one that much, but I really enjoy Chet. This was my first introduction to hearing him as far as his vocals. At first, I was maybe about 12, 13 years old when I heard this, and I wasn't really too excited about the vocals. I would normally skip those tracks, but his voice grew on me as the years went by. So Chet Baker, She Was So Good to Me. Now, talking a little bit about funk, this is my latest, or one of my latest additions to my Chet collection. I had it back in the day when it was originally released. And this one is called You Can't Go Home Again. And this actually is Chet's, maybe you could call him an attempt at funk jazz, jazz funk, and excellent lineup here as well. He's got Michael Brecker on tenor, John Schofield on guitar, Alfonso Johnson on electric bass, Tony Williams on drums. But you know what? As much as you would think Chet Baker's not going to work in a funk setting, this one works pretty well. He does a great version of Love for Sale, gets into a great groove. But the highlight for the album is just a really heartbreaking rendition of a song called You Can't Go Home Again. Really one of Chet at his lyrical best. He's playing almost in a whisper, and I believe it's one of Paul Desmond's last recordings. Just a beautiful, beautiful song, You Can't Go Home Again. And there's Chet on the back, looking old for the years. And this one was recorded in 1977. But once again, don't sleep on this one either. Even though it's Chet in an unusual environment, playing some funk jazz, his playing is excellent. Now this is a straight ahead jazz album. This is Smokin' with the Chet Baker Quintet. Chet made several, and this is on the Prestige label. You can see it's got, this was a repress. It's got that old Prestige label there. But this was actually a repress, and I'm not sure what year this repress is, but this recording was actually done in 1966. A great cover. It's called Chet Baker, Smokin' with the Chet Baker Quintet. A great lineup here. It's Chet Baker, George Coleman, and here Chet's playing flugelhorn. But he plays it quite well with a big round tone. He's in excellent shape for the year. And he's got George Coleman on tenor, Kirk Lightsey on piano, Herman Wright, and Roy Brooks smokes throughout. Actually, there's several albums that Richard Carpenter recorded for Chet, with Chet. He was the producer, and it's kind of an ugly story there. I think he really ripped off the musicians. But there's several. There's Smokin', and I can't really remember the other titles, but it's kind of a play maybe on the the Miles Davis albums of the late 50s, the Workin' and Smokin' and things like that, or Workin', Cookin', things like that. But if you ever see these on Prestige, Chet is really blowing up a storm here. One of the highlights is a fine solo on Fine and Dandy. Chet really playing his excellent best. And once again, Roy Brooks, Herman Kirk Lightsey on piano, and George Coleman really blowing up a storm on this. It really is a smoking album. Now there's different Chet Bakers in a sense. He had a long career. He was born in 1928 and he died in 1988 at the age of 58. He actually fell out of a hotel room in Europe. Kind of mysterious circumstances. They said that he fell in a drug stupor. Some people said it was a drug deal gone bad. Not sure. There's a lot of stuff on the internet about that if you want to investigate it. But he's got an interesting and might say tragic story. One of the real tragic figures in jazz. But there's some people like early Chet when he's young and spry and full of life and energy. And then there's Chet in the later years, which I believe he was still playing really great. This is Chet Baker, The Touch of Your Lips, with Doug Rainey, Niels Henning, Oscar Ørsted Pedersen. And yeah, it's just a trio, no drums. And this was recorded in Europe. And Chet spent many of his later years in Europe and did a lot of recordings, especially live recordings. This one here is a studio recording, but really outstanding. I really enjoy hearing Doug Rainey's understated lyrical guitar. And of course, Niels Ørsted Pedersen, you can't go wrong with him on that great bass. But Chet's tone changed. He had his teeth knocked out and he had to learn how to play all over with dentures. So this was in, I think, 1966. But his tone really changed. It was much softer, more of a, sometimes he would even go down to a whisper, but really beautiful. And his playing was as lyrical as ever when he was on. In fact, I got to hear him 3 nights at the Lighthouse back in the late 70s, it must have been, right about the time of You Can't Go Home Again, at the time of that recording. I guess it probably been about 77 or 78. And he was really playing excellent. Like I say, I went 3 or 4 nights in a row at the Lighthouse, and it's probably some of the most amazing music I ever heard. But he did several recordings on Steeplechase with this same trio, Doug Rainey and Niels Ørsted Pedersen. And this is, I really enjoy later Chet too. And then of course, everybody's anxiously been awaiting The Tone Poet. It's finally been repressed and released. And I finally got my hands on it. Chet Baker Sings. And it kind of has a companion. The Chet Baker Sings and Plays. And both of them, you might have a favorite. Chet Baker sings and plays. This one is a little more orchestrated. It's got some strings on some of the tracks, where Chet Baker Sings is strictly a combo. And one of the things that shines on all of these albums is Russ Freeman playing piano. Just beautiful piano from Russ Freeman and how he accompanies Chet. His solos are spot on. Chet, of course, is Chet. He's sounding beautiful as ever, and his vocals are just full of life and energy and pain and sorrow. He brings to the standards a truly unique gift. And so I'm really enjoying listening to these early Chet Baker albums to go along with the later Chet. I enjoy it all. Like I say, some people have their favorites. They like early Chet. Actually, that's usually the standard. Most people prefer the early Chet to the later Chet. I love it all because Chet was one remarkable player. So that was a look at my Chet Baker albums. Like and subscribe. See you next time. Joseph out.